Imagine a bank vault. You're thinking of thick steel doors, laser grids, and armed guards. But in the year 2016, the biggest heist in human history didn't happen with a drill or a bomb. It happened in the total silence, inside a dusty room in Dhaka, Bangladesh. At this very moment, $1 billion is beginning to evaporate into thin air. No alarms are ringing, no one is shouting. The only witness? A cheap malfunctioning printer that is about to reveal a secret so dark, it could collapse the global economy. If you think your money is safe in the bank, you have no idea who is actually watching the ledger. Bangladesh Bank is the heart of the nation's wealth. It sits in a bustling district, surrounded by the chaos of the city. But inside, the technology was a relic of the past. While the world was moving toward encrypted clouds and AI-driven security, this billion-dollar institution was held together by digital duct tape. To save money, the bank's management made a fatal decision. They purchased second-hand, $10 network switches to connect their most sensitive computers to the internet. No firewall, no sophisticated monitoring. They didn't just leave the back door open. They threw away the keys and put up a sign that said, "Welcome." But the heist didn't start on that fateful Friday. It started exactly 1 year earlier. In early 2015, an invisible shadow slipped through those $10 switches. It was a sophisticated piece of malware, a digital parasite designed not to destroy, but to observe. For 365 days, the hackers lived inside the bank's servers. They weren't just looking at account balances. They were studying the soul of the bank. They watched how the clerks typed. They learned the specific slang used in internal memos. They even tracked the printer's maintenance schedule. They knew the bank better than the governor did. They waited with the patience of a predator for the one moment when the entire world would be looking the other way. Timing is the difference between a criminal and a genius. The hackers chose a specific window, Friday morning in Dhaka. In the Muslim world, Friday is a day of rest. The bank would be empty. But there's a deeper layer to this chess move. While Dhaka sleeps on Friday, New York, the capital of global finance, is still wide awake on Thursday afternoon. The hackers needed the New York Federal Reserve to be open to process the transfers, but they needed the Bangladesh bank to be closed so no one could stop them. It was a 12-hour window of pure, unprotected opportunity. The digital ghosts prepared their commands. 35 separate requests, total value, $951 million. With a single click, the heist began. The first sign of the apocalypse wasn't a flashing red light. It was a paper jam. When the few duty officers arrived at the bank that Friday, they noticed the Swift terminal printer, the machine that automatically prints every transaction record, was silent. Usually it hummed all night. When they tried to manual start it, it coughed out an error message. They thought it was just a typical hardware glitch. They didn't realize that the printer had been silenced by the malware to hide the evidence of the billions leaving the country. They walked away to get tea, leaving the machine broken. Behind that paper jam, the wealth of a nation was being funneled into the dark corners of the earth. The $10 router was more than just a cheap piece of equipment. It was an open wound. It sat unprotected, a direct link from the bank's internal network straight to the internet. This wasn't a sophisticated breach that exploited zero-day vulnerabilities. This was digital larceny enabled by sheer neglect. The hackers didn't need to be geniuses. They just needed to find the path of least resistance. And the Bangladesh bank had laid out a red carpet. Once inside, they didn't immediately grab the money. That would have been amateurish. Their goal was far more insidious, to become one with the system itself. For an entire year, the infiltrators moved like phantoms. Their malware wasn't designed to destroy data, but to record every single keystroke, every password, every email. They meticulously mapped the bank's internal network, identifying the critical servers that stored Swift credentials, the unique codes that authorized international transfers. Imagine a shadow sitting on your shoulder for 365 days, learning your habits, your weak points, your anxieties. They knew when the IT staff went for lunch, when the night shift was minimal, and critically, which employee accounts had the highest level of authorization for financial transfers. This wasn't about breaking down a wall. It was about learning the language of the people who built it. Their ultimate prize was access to the Swift terminals. These dedicated computers, isolated from the public internet, were the true vault doors. The hackers spent months trying to find a way onto these machines. They installed keyloggers, software that records every single key pressed, on the general network computers. They waited for an employee to make a mistake, to briefly connect a Swift terminal to the regular network for an update, or simply out of habit. And finally, someone did. A single momentary lapse was all it took. The ghosts now had the digital keys to the global financial kingdom. They could now send messages that, to any other bank in the world, would appear to come directly from the Bangladesh Central Bank itself. With full access, their next move was to prepare their escape route. They didn't want any witnesses. The hackers deployed a new piece of malware specifically designed to target the Swift terminal's printer. This wasn't about stealing, it was about silencing. They programmed it to disable the printer at a specific time, right when the bulk of their fraudulent transactions would begin to print. No paper trail, no immediate alarms. This was the genius of their plan, to make $1 billion disappear in the dark without leaving a single tangible trace. The stage was set. The players were in position, and the world was about to witness a crime that redefined what it means to be secure. While the city of Dhaka was draped in the quiet of a Friday morning, 8,000 miles away, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York was just starting its Thursday afternoon. The Fed is the bank for banks, the ultimate clearinghouse of the world. It is a fortress of gold and code. But on this afternoon, the fortress doors didn't just open. They were held wide. At exactly 8:36 p.m., the first Swift message arrived. It was a request to move $20 million to an account in Sri Lanka. The credentials were flawless. The digital signatures were authentic. To the Fed's automated systems, this wasn't a heist. It was just business as usual. The ghosts had finally started to speak, and they were speaking the language of authority. One request wasn't enough. The hackers knew they had to work fast before someone, somewhere, noticed the bleeding. In rapid succession, 35 separate transfer orders were fired into the New York Fed system, totaling a staggering $951 million. Nearly $1 billion, the entire foreign exchange reserve of a developing nation, was being siphoned off in a matter of hours. The requests were cleverly disguised as payments for state-owned projects, consultants, infrastructure, nonprofits. It was a flood of data designed to overwhelm any human oversight. For the first few hours, the plan worked perfectly. $101 million successfully cleared the Fed and began its journey into the shadows of the global banking system. The ghosts were winning. But even the most sophisticated digital predators can be undone by the simplest of human errors. One of the transfer requests was for $20 million to be sent to a Sri Lankan NGO called the Shalika Fandation. But in the adrenaline-fueled rush of the greatest heist in history, a hacker's finger slipped. They typed Shalika Fandation, a single letter, an A instead of an O. This tiny, seemingly insignificant typo triggered an automatic red flag at Deutsche Bank, which was acting as a correspondent. A junior clerk, noticing the misspelling, paused the transaction. It was a thread that, once pulled, began to unravel the entire operation. The Fed, alerted by the suspicious name, halted the remaining 30 transfers. $850 million was frozen in midair. $1 billion empire was saved by a single, clumsy keystroke. The Fed tried to contact the Bangladesh Central Bank to verify the sudden surge in transfers. They sent urgent Swift messages. They made phone calls. But back in Dhaka, it was still Friday. The building was empty. The printers were jammed by malware. The ghosts had planned for the bank to be closed, but they hadn't planned for a Typo to ring the alarm while no one was there to hear it. For the next 24 hours, $101 million was already in the hands of the hackers, while the remaining $850 million sat in a digital limbo. The race against time had begun, but the hackers were already miles ahead, moving the stolen fortune into a place where the law couldn't reach: the neon-lit floors of the Philippine casinos. While the Federal Reserve was still trying to reach a silent office in Dhaka, the $101 million that cleared the system had already found its destination. It didn't land in a high-security vault. It landed in 5 ordinary bank accounts at the Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation in Manila. These accounts hadn't been opened by master criminals. They were opened months in advance using stolen identities, names of people who didn't exist or who had no idea their names were being used in the heist of the century. The ghosts had created a landing strip in the Pacific, and the money was coming in hot. In the world of the dark economy, the first rule of survival is speed. You don't let the money sit. You make it disappear into the noise of the city. On February 9th, as the world began to wake up to the news of the missing billions, a woman walked into the RCBC Bank branch in Manila. Her name was Kim Wong, a high-stakes casino agent. Over the next few days, the $81 million, the portion that reached the Philippines, was withdrawn in cold, hard cash. Imagine the scene: millions of dollars being loaded into armored cars and private vehicles. This wasn't a digital transfer anymore. This was physical weight, thousands of pounds of paper. The money was being moved to a place where no central bank, no FBI agent, and no digital trace could follow: the VIP rooms of Manila's most elite casinos. In the Philippines at the time, casinos were a black hole for financial regulation. Once the money entered those doors, it effectively ceased to exist as stolen property. This is where the laundromat begins. The stolen cash was converted into gambling chips. But the hackers weren't there to play for fun. They hired junket players, professional gamblers, whose only job was to sit at the tables for days. They would bet on both sides of a game, winning on one hand and losing on the other. It didn't matter if they lost 10% or 20% in the process. That was just the cost of doing business. What mattered was the receipt. When they cashed out their remaining chips at the end of the week, they didn't have stolen bank money anymore. They had legitimate gambling winnings. They had a paper trail that looked perfectly legal. The stolen wealth of Bangladesh was being scrubbed clean under the neon lights of the baccarat tables. By the time investigators from Dhaka arrived in Manila, the trail was cold. The bank accounts were empty. The casino chips had been cashed out. The money had been split, moved through shell companies in Hong Kong, and evaporated into the global shadow market. A billion-dollar heist had been reduced to a few million in clean winnings, and the masterminds were nowhere to be found. The Philippine authorities were left chasing shadows in a maze of legal loopholes and corporate veils. The ghosts had completed their mission. They had turned a digital error into a physical fortune, leaving a nation in financial ruin and the world's banking system in a state of absolute shock. But the most terrifying part wasn't how they did it. It was who was actually behind the keyboard. As the dust settled in Manila and the digital smoke cleared in New York, a team of elite cyber investigators from FireEye and the FBI began to dissect the remains of the malware. What they found wasn't the work of a rogue group of hackers or a criminal syndicate looking for a quick score. They found fingerprints, not physical ones, but digital signatures buried deep within the code, specific encryption methods, unique subroutines, and reusable libraries that had been seen before. These were the hallmarks of the Lazarus group, a hacking collective that doesn't answer to a boss in a basement, but to a supreme leader in a forbidden capital. The trail didn't lead to a hideout. It led to North Korea. This wasn't just a heist. It was an act of state-sponsored economic warfare. Why would a nation-state rob a bank? For North Korea, the answer was survival. Heavily sanctioned and cut off from the global economy, the regime had turned its most brilliant minds into a digital army of thieves. The $81 million that vanished in the Philippine casinos wasn't spent on luxury cars or private islands. It was funneled back into Pyongyang to fund a nuclear program and a ballistic missile infrastructure. In the dark economy, the line between a bank robbery and a geopolitical threat is non-existent. The money stolen from the people of Bangladesh was being converted into the fuel of a global security crisis. The ghosts in the machine weren't just after wealth, they were after power. The Bangladesh bank heist changed the world of finance forever. It shattered the illusion of the perfect SWIFT system. It forced every central bank on Earth to realize that their greatest enemy wasn't a man with a gun, but a $10 router and a poorly trained clerk. Security protocols were rewritten overnight. Multi-factor authentication became the law. The Federal Reserve added layers of human oversight to every transaction. But for Bangladesh, the scars remain. Despite years of legal battles, only about $15 million of the stolen $81 million has ever been recovered. The rest remains a phantom, a permanent loss in the ledger of a developing nation, and a permanent gain for a shadow regime. Today, the hackers of the Lazarus Group are still active. They have moved on to crypto exchanges and NFT heists, evolving as fast as the security meant to stop them. The ghosts haven't left the machine, they've just found deeper places to hide. The story of the Bangladesh bank heist is a chilling reminder that in our connected world, we are only as strong as our weakest link. Whether it's a $10 router or a single typo, the dark economy is always watching, waiting for the printer to stutter again. Because in the game of digital ghosts, the heist never truly ends. It just changes its code.